The profile of an airborne soldier. To be able to parachute, you must have some guts for the selection course, and you need agility, coordination, and confidence to jump. But to be an airborne soldier, you must be smart, disciplined, fit, physically and mentally tough, and determined. Have a team spirit, be aggressive, have initiative, and also have a sense of humor.
On Monday the 15th of April, I was one of the 360 volunteers present, all with the aim of becoming qualified paratroopers. The obstacle standing in our way, however, was the daunting and much talked about 3-day selection course. I think we all woke up at 4:30 on Monday morning with a nervous knot in our stomachs. I'd woken up a few times in the night with the awful realization that in a few hours we would be kicking off on one of the hardest tests we'd ever have to face in our lives. After all that we had already been through in one parachute battalion, the thought of not making the initial entrance tests terrified me. These tests have been designed to test strength and stamina. I find it helped to isolate each exercise in my mind and then concentrate on meeting the requirements for that particular one. Otherwise, the thought of all that lay before me would have been too demoralizing. The fear of failing was present each minute of the day, as everything had to be done in a specific time, and the pressure was therefore never let up. Never in the history of the parachute selection course have so many people attempted it at one time. 364 started, 136 made it. Little did we know that this would only be 43% of the initial group starting. The members starting were from 3-2 Battalion, 7 Medical Battalion, 14 Artillery Battalion, 44 Parachute Brigade. There were plus minus 20 people from other units, and of course the rest were made up from one parachute battalion. Monday morning we kicked off with the selection tests, which consisted of 8 different exercises. The first one that my group started with was the so-called scarptra or sheep carry. It's where the aim of the exercise is to carry a friend on your shoulders who has supposedly been injured. Bend down, carry your buddy on your shoulders. He carries both your rifles. You've both got a battle kit on with 4 liters of water in each battle kit and 5 magazines and your helmets. You carry your buddy for 175 meters and you have 75 seconds in which to do it. This is very tiring on the legs, and when I had finished that I couldn't believe that I had another 3 days still to go. And I was feeling that tired. It takes quite an effort to make it in 75 seconds, and a lot of people fell and had to get up and start again. This all took place in the unit up by the parachute training hangar, where we'd hopefully be in 3 days' time. The next exercise which my group attempted or did was the push-ups. We had to do 46 push-ups without a break in rhythm. This done, we moved on to the sit-ups, where we had to do 76 sit-ups without a break of rhythm in 2 minutes. We took turns, one guy counting and one guy doing the exercise. We then swapped over. The instructors were present at all times to check that this was being done. The next exercise was to climb a rope which was 4.5 meters high. This took place in the hangar, and this I find to be one of the easiest exercises. There's a certain method to doing it. You use your legs, take the weight off your arms. Many guys who weren't from the one parachute battalion hadn't mastered the art of doing this, and quite a few guys battled with this exercise and therefore resulted in tiring their arms out at this early stage. Our next exercise that we had to do was to successfully jump over the wall, which was 2 meters high. We had a 12-step run-up, carrying our battle jacket with its 4 liters of water, its magazines, and our rifle. This wall also has a specific method to it. Many people battled with this as well. We ended off with a 3.2 kilometer run in our full battle kit with water and so on. We had 18 minutes to do this in. This was the last exercise and succeeded in tiring us out quite a bit. In all of these exercises, there are 4 stamina and 4 strength exercises. You can only fail 2 from each category. 140 people fell off these initial entrance tests. During all this time, the instructors can offer no encouragement, and it is therefore just up to the individual to make it. The 2 exercises which were then followed were the so-called shuttle kicks and the shuttle runs. The shuttle kicks are again very tiring on the legs. You have to do 120 without breaking rhythm. The shuttle runs which follow that, you have to do 40 and 95 seconds, and they're 6.2 meters apart. You have to run, touch both hands over a line on one side, and run back and touch both hands over the line on the other side. This is again very strenuous, deceptively so, and when you finish this, you're pretty well finished. You still have to carry on with the exercises which follow out of the camp.
After the initial entrance tests, we all got divided into about 5 groups and went into the hangar to box. The boxing's main aim was to see how aggressive we could actually get. Lots of us didn't realize we could actually get so aggressive, but once we were inside the ring for 1.5 to 2 minutes, and our opponents started hitting us quite a bit, we got quite aggressive. Lots of the guys had to actually fight against their best of friends in the unit, and they didn't enjoy it very much, but they had to do it because there was always the thought of dropping off the PD course. The boxing would last for in between 2 to 3 minutes if the opponents were quite aggressive, but if they weren't aggressive, they'd carry on until they'd satisfy the instructor. After the boxing, we all got loaded onto sawmills and we were taken just outside of Bloemfontein, where our next exercise would begin. The next exercise was exercise Greyhound, which was a 15-kilometer route march in 2 hours 40 minutes. It started at a little shop, a little farm shop, and it would end at our temporary bases for the next 2 days, a military training grounds called Valbank. We had to walk with our rifle, our full kit, which was in between 20 to 30 kilograms, and if your kit bag didn't weigh quite 20 kilograms, we'd have to carry wooden blocks inside it to make up the extra weight. We started walking. We walked for about 2 kilometers on a tar road, and then we went on to quite a rough dirt road. Lots of the guys battled there, but as it was very uneven and it started hurting their feet. The whole 15-kilometer walk gave us lots of time to think about what lay ahead of us, and it gave us lots of time also to think about why we were actually doing it and what drove us on to do it. Nobody actually knows what gives you that inner determination, but you just carry on. There was a water point halfway through the walk, but it didn't seem like halfway. It seemed like it was the end of the walk, but then we knew we still had another halfway to go. When we got to the end, we were all hoping for some rest, as it was after sundown, and we were hoping to get some sleep and get fresh for the next day, as most of us were quite tired, and we were worried now that we were already tired and it's only the first day. But they gathered us together, and they told us we'd have to start digging trenches now. We weren't sure exactly what they meant by this, but they explained quite well. It had to be a meter deep, meter wide, and 2 meters long. But lots of the guys had actually heard that they only let you dig for a certain while and they let you go sleep. But they hadn't planned it this speedy course. We dug and carried on digging. It was quite hard because lots of the guys only had picks, and to dig a meter by 2 meter hole isn't so easy with a pick. You had to try borrow a spade from someone who also wants to use a spade. and there were quite a few fights and arguments over who can use what equipment. Eventually the corporal came at 5 o'clock in the morning and said we can stop digging and cover up our holes and camouflage them, and then we can go and have some sleep. We did this, but lots of the guys were very lazy and cold at this stage, and they weren't too keen on covering up the holes too well and camouflaging them. So we all got together and we were ready to go and sleep, and the corporal made us go back down and cover up the holes again and camouflage them. Eventually about 5:30 we were allowed to go and sleep, but we had to wake up very early the next morning for the following tests that would go on throughout that day. First of all, we woke up and we had to have a rifle inspection. Most of our rifles were very dirty from the 15-kilometer walk along the dust road and all the dust, and also from the digging that night. And just lying out in the open, the dew had collected on them and caused a bit of rust. Most of the guys failed rifle inspection.
The rifle inspection ended with everyone breathing a big sigh of relief now that it was over. It was then explained to us that we would have a speed march for 2 kilometers in order to sort everyone out into groups for the forthcoming stretcher race. I tried my hardest to get up to the front because that was where I figured the strongest and fittest guys would be. This didn't really always work out to be ideal because guys in the back groups did come in quite early towards the end, and guys in the front did come in quite towards the back. But anyway, at that stage I thought that was the best thing to do. We were stopped in our speed march in due course and divided up into sevens, as it would be 7 guys to a stretcher. We would have to carry the stretcher for 12 kilometers in 2 hours and 45 minutes. We were then dealt out camouflage cream. We spread this on our faces, and this added a bit of discomfort and made our faces quite hot in the sun. Each stretcher weighs about 75 kilograms, and it is quite a shock to the system when you first bend down and lift it up. The realization of what the whole stretcher race is all about hits you like a ton of bricks when you first pick that stretcher up. And then you're off. One guy on each side holding onto a thin handle. It seems as if it were designed to cause you as much discomfort as possible, which I suppose that was the whole aim of the handle. If there's one common experience shared by everyone on the stretcher run, it's the fact that there's no comfortable way to carry it. You try putting it on your shoulder, then carrying it on your head, then holding it in your hands. Before long, you're folding up bush hats and t-shirts and scarves, or anything that is soft, and placing it on your shoulder or holding it in your hands. And more often than not, this is dropped along the side of the road, and somebody has to run back to pick it up and give it to the next guy who's calling for it. And the catch to the whole exercise as well is that only 4 could carry the stretcher at a time, with 3 supposedly resting along the way. It was honestly the worst physical experience of my life. You're trudging along with this unbearable weight on your shoulders, trying to do your share of the work. So you fix your eyes on a tree 100 meters or so away and tell yourself that you'll carry the stretcher till then, and then ask for a relief, or whistle as everyone would scream in Afrikaans. Once relieved, you'd stumble away from the stretcher and pray that no one would need you to take over for them for at least a couple of minutes. And now into the walk, and the camouflage was running into your eyes and stinging them. And it's a terrible feeling when you look at your watch and see that you're only an hour into the walk, and that another hour and a half still lies before you. You doubt whether you can make it at times. It was at times like this when I looked at my watch and there was so much more time to go, more so on the stretch race than at any other time during the PD course, that I most doubted my ability and endurance to make it. There could be no relaxed pace during this race either. You couldn't walk slowly. The whole time someone would be saying, "We're not going fast enough," or "Time's running out." So you'd try jogging a bit, which caused the stretcher to bounce on your shoulders and bruise the collarbone. And then you'd put it on your head and your neck would get sore with each jolt or uneven ditch in the surface of the track, which was uneven. Therefore, guys were always slipping and carrying the stretch at different heights, and some in a ditch and some on top of the ditch. This caused a lot of tension and fighting in this stress situation. Towards the end, when you could eventually see the bakkie in the distance and you knew that that was where the end point was, the commandant would come up beside you in his car and tell you that unless you started running you wouldn't make it. Everyone would hoist it up and carry it a bit faster for that last 500 meters or so. When you get within shouting distance of the end point, Captain Raimondo would hold up his hand, make as if he was about to stop, to cut you off from the selection course, and so you'd carry on sprinting a bit harder. You eventually make it to Captain Raimondo and thankfully put the stretcher down, and he'd turn around and tell you that you hadn't made it and you must stand to one side and wait for the SALUUT to take you back to base because you've fallen off the selection course. That was the most sinking feeling and most terrible feeling of the selection course, was when Captain Raimondo told us that we hadn't made it in time and that we had fallen off. After a lot of pleading and arguing and begging, he eventually said, "You've got 20 seconds to put it back on the SALUUT, and if you put it back on the SALUUT in 20 seconds, you've made it." I don't think we ever ran that fast with a stretch in our lives before. After that, we put it back on the SALUUT and lay down against the tire for a couple of minutes, resting. It was a fantastic feeling to finish the stretcher race.
After about 1 or 2 minutes rest after the stretcher run, we all had to climb onto the SALUUT with 1 or 2 groups outstanding. The SALUUT started up and started taking us along a rough bush road back to the camp where we would be sleeping. The 2 groups that are out were still walking, and Captain Raimondo rode out to them and told them the bad news. 1 or 2 guys also fell off during the stretcher and they couldn't handle it. We got back to the camp. We had a foot inspection, which I thought was very good because lots of the guys had sore feet and they had blisters. We all took off our shoes and walked towards the ambulance, but that seemed to make our feet more sore because the bush was full of thorns. We got to the ambulance and we had methylate injected into our blisters, which seemed to make our feet even more sore because it burnt. our next exercise, which was exercise Kwekamp. It is a 1.5 kilometer obstacle course in the bush, and we had to do it 4 times. Each time we had to make it in 8 minutes. At the starting point, we were all divided up into 4 groups, which were quite big groups, which made the obstacle course even harder. First of all, we ran down a dirt road, which was one of the best places to catch up on your time, because the next part of the course was very narrow, and most of the obstacles were narrow, and you couldn't overtake anybody. And if people got tired in front of you, you just had to stay behind with them. The first obstacle was a pole we had to climb over. It wasn't a very wide pole, so the guys at the back were screaming and shouting at the guys in the front to get over the pole quickly so they could carry on with the course. We ran down the road and then started climbing the hill. Halfway up the hill, we had a whole lot of tyres which we had to go through, but only 2 people could go through the tyres at a time. The tyres were in order to get a coordination right. We had to step in between the tyres. After the tyres, we carried on running the hill, and then we turned onto a little bush path. The bush path was only wide enough for 1 person to go along, so overtaking over here was virtually impossible. If you wanted to overtake, you had to run through the bushes. We ran down the bush path and through a dry riverbed, which was quite sore at the feet because of the rocks and the hard mud. Then we ran back up to the road, where we had another little chance to overtake people if we had the stamina. And then we had to do leopard crawl underneath some overhanging pieces of wire. Commandant Toliad was standing at the wire, chasing the guys and screaming and shouting at them, trying to get them more aggressive all the time. Only two guys could go underneath the wire at a time, which made the guys get even more cross and angry. If you try to go too close to the guy in front of you under the wire, you normally land up getting kicked in the face when he pulled off to carry on to the next obstacle. Then we ran up the hill again towards some old ruins, where we ran into old house and we had to jump out the window. Only 1 person could fit out the window at a time, so there was quite a bit of screaming and shouting there as well. We ran up and we had to climb underneath some wire, and then we ran over some ruins, some old crumbly walls. Then we ran back down to the road and along the road, and at a certain point in the road, just before the ending point, we had to jump from a certain distance onto a pole and run over the pole without falling off, and then jump off the other side and then over the end. This exercise was one of the hardest exercises for me. I found it to be one of the most tiring, because 1.5 kilometers in 8 minutes is quite a sprint, and to do it 4 times, you're actually sprinting 6 kilometers in a short time. Plus minus 4 guys fell off in this exercise.
during the day, to end off the second day, was pulling a SAML 50 around a tree, which was about 50 meters away. This is called Operation Horsepower. We were divided up into 3 groups, and it was actually quite a fun exercise, which built a lot of team spirit, and it was the first time we could actually enjoy an exercise in the selection course. The SAML was to be pulled around this tree, which lay about, as I said, 50 meters away, and then back again. The team that took the longest to do this would have a surprise of pulling the SAML an extra time. So there was a bit of inspiration. The record set was 1 minute 57, which we're very proud of, as it's a world record, and we've been told that no other unit in the world has ever had the inclination to pull SAMLs around trees before. The team that was slowest went again as promised. After that, we then got our map references and our maps, and we were divided into groups of about 10, 12 for the night march, or Operation Southern Cross as it was called. This route was about 12 to 15 kilometers long, and there were 4 reference points set up somewhere in the bush where we had to check into. We started walking at 8 o'clock with our full kit on, which consisted of a backpack weighing about 20 kilograms and over, a rifle and a helmet. It soon got very, very cold, and an assortment of scarves and balaclavas came out. Helmets got tied onto backpacks. All groups set off at different times. Each group had its own different experiences, but we all thought that we'd walk for about 4 hours, 5 hours at the most, and get back to camp at between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock and get into our sleeping bags and go to sleep. We were wrong. My group negotiated a hill in pitch darkness, and I think we all went over this hill. It's very tiring as you stumble through bushes and over rocks and ditches, all in groping your way forward in pitch darkness. And at this stage of the course, you're starting to feel the effects of all that you have already been through, and your feet are hurting, and the urge to sleep is incredible. At our last reference point, we had heard that we'd have to pick up 2 marbles or concrete blocks and 4 poles between our group of 12 or 10, whatever it was. We were never really sure of this, as rumors tend to get a bit rife. But about 50 meters away from this last checkpoint, Captain Raimondo came over the radio to inform us that we wouldn't have to collect our marbles and our poles, that we should just head straight to the reference point and then back to base. Of course, we were very happy and relieved, as we had been dreading the marble and the pole the whole night. When we got into that reference point, we were told that someone had been spreading disinformation over the radio, and that we should hurry up and pick up our quota of marbles and poles. This again was a hard thing to accept at that stage of the night, and at that stage we all sat down and must have drifted off to sleep for about 10 minutes. We eventually got up freezing cold after you get warm when you're walking, and as soon as you stop, you get cold, of course. And now all we could see in the distance was that hill that we had already been over, and at that stage it seemed like an impossible task, us being footsore and tired from lack of sleep and really not eager to carry on. All we felt like doing was sleeping. We eventually got going again, with each pair on a pole choosing their own best route over the hill as we got close to it. Again, we were stumbling in the darkness up the hill, but this time carrying a pole on our shoulders, and it gets uncomfortable in the shoulders. You're carrying it on your hip and on your water bottles, and then in your hands and back on your shoulder. The first guy falling down, and then the second guy falling down. I'm surprised that no ankles were twisted or broken up that hill. Anyway, we stumbled into camp at about 4:45 that morning, and lay shivering in the cold, waiting for the rest of our group to come in. Came in drips and drabs, some having had an easier time on the mountain than others, some disappearing down pits and into streams, some guys took the opportunity to eat some food from their rat pack, and then we all slept for about an hour and a half until we were woken up the next morning. That morning when we were woken up, we had a rifle inspection, and that passed. We then had to get ready and pack all our stuff, all our belongings in 2 minutes or so. Otherwise you'd run around a tree, so everyone was quite motivated to pack their belongings quickly. We then got ready for Operation Sudden Death, which was a 4.6 kilometer canister run, which we had 40 minutes to run this 4.6 kilometers in. And this canister is another much talked about piece of equipment. It's a oblong shaped piece of steel or metal which is about just over 1 meter in length, and it is, again, we had been told that if you took some rope you could tie it around your back and you could tie it comfortably to yourself, but I could find no way to tie this canister to myself to make it comfortable, so I just abandoned the idea of the rope and decided to carry it whichever way. The canister weighed about 4.5 kilograms, and we were all lined up. We had our battle jackets with the 4 liters of water and our rifle on as well, and our helmet. Anyway, the whistle went and we started running. You'd run as best as you could, and eventually you'd run on the downhills and try walk as fast as you could on the uphills, hoping that, all the time remembering that they told you that if you walked you wouldn't make it, so there was a lot of pressure, and you never really knew if you were going to make that run or not. You try putting the canister on your shoulder and then running with it. Your arms or your shoulder would get very sore. Then you'd try putting it on your hips with your arms around it, with your fingers locked. And after a couple of meters, that would get tiring. There was another exercise where you just had no comfortable position to put it. The guys that had managed to strap it behind their backs were soon getting very sore backs, and so that wasn't helping at all. Captain Ramondo, halfway through, some guys were told that the finishing point was in 50 meters. They made that 50 meters in a burst of speed, and then were told that no, that wasn't the finishing point. The finishing point was actually 2 k's away or so. This was again played on your mind, and it was hard to take that. As time started running out, you started getting more desperate and started trying to rather try run on the uphills than walk, and eventually in the distance when you could see that bucky and you knew that time was running out, you ran the last kilometer or so with the instructor at the end, had his hand up for many of the chaps, threatening to cut them off. So a lot of people sprinted for about 500 meters thinking they weren't going to make it. About 6 people didn't make that run. We finished that, packed everything up onto the sawmills and came back to base. At that stage in the sawmills, everyone was almost a euphoric feeling. Everyone was very relieved. Everyone thinking that they'd made it, that they couldn't really drop off now. Now, this wasn't true, but at the time it was nice to think that. A lot of people dozed off and went to sleep in the sawmill. Didn't matter about the bumps and the jerks. I think everyone was tired enough to go to sleep. It was nice to be coming out of the bush and to be going home or back to the base again.
Yes, barakat kayo! Kanan! Yes!
We got back to the base and our different squads were formed up in front of the obstacle course. This was explained to us again that we'd have to do it 3 times, once as a sort of practice without kit and 2 times with kit, which included your rifle and your battle jacket. Jumping over the wall, a lot of people found problems here. A lot of the units hadn't been taught properly how to jump over a wall. Most of the people from one parachute battalion were good at this, and this did need a certain spring in your legs, so if you were tired you would find it pretty hard, and we were all tired. Once over that wall, you would swing across the pit onto another rope obstacle which reached up pretty high. You'd have to climb up the ropes holding onto the knots. At this stage it was the wise thing to try and use your legs to pull yourself up rather than your arms, because your arms, you still had 2 more times to do the obstacle course, and it worked very hard on your arms, and your arms had no strength in them at this stage of the course, and that was very frustrating when you had no strength in your arms. Once you'd finished the ladder, we had a hand across hand obstacle where you'd have to swing yourself across. This again worked on your arms, and a lot of people found it very hard because their arms were so tired. But I think this was one of the easier things on the obstacle course itself, and most people made this without too much of a problem. The next was the leopard crawling under the barbed wire. Underneath the barbed wire is a lot of stones, and this is a place where your knees and your elbows get quite sore, and your rifle gets hooked up in the wire, and the top of your battle jacket gets hooked up in the wire, and there's people screaming at you to hurry up, and the rocks are busy bruising your knees and your elbows. This is quite an uncomfortable exercise, and it's surprisingly, to me at least, it was surprisingly tiring. Once you get out of that, your stomach muscles are tired, and your shoulder muscles are tired, and you have got to run to the next obstacle, which is a metal pole which you have got to leap across. You do that springing over with your legs, and that's, if you know the right method to do it, is okay. It just takes another bit of energy out of you. The poles stacked up upon one another, getting up that is a very tiring exercise, and again it's very hard on your arms, so you've got to try and use your legs as much as possible, and you've got to reach up as far as you can, and it's just that much distance to make it uncomfortable and not easy. And if you haven't got a head for heights, it's quite hard. You've just got to shut out the height and just concentrate on going over. But at this stage, I think you do that pretty well. You're not too worried about heights. You just want to get over the obstacle and on your way again. And each time you just know that it's one last time that you have to do that obstacle, one less time you ever have to do it. And that spurred me on. Once again, you've got to jump over 2 metal ropes in your path. You jump over that, and you're onto the big dreaded olifant or elephant. Going up once again on those swing ropes, swing ladder, that is again very tiring and works your arms yet again. There's no easy way to go up that, and you go hand over hand up that, and onto the place where you get very scared that you can fall off here, because you go across a rope on your stomach, and you know that if you overbalance and fall down, although you won't land on the ground, you'll land in the nets underneath, but you'll have to go right back and start the whole elephant again. And you've got a certain time, again, you've been told you've got a certain time to do this obstacle course in it. It's 18 minutes. And the whole time you've got instructors spurring you on, telling you to hurry up, you're not going to make it. So you think that if you fall off this rope going across on your stomach, that you're wasting time and you won't make it. Again, there's a certain method to doing it. You hook your leg over and you use your leg as well as your arms to pull yourself across. You have to, because it's, again, very tiring on your arms trying to pull yourself across on your stomach. You get over onto the other side and you walk across a pole holding onto a piece of rope that goes across. This again is to get you used to heights, and it's not very tiring, but it's just a height exercise, and you can make that. Sliding down the ropes on the other side, there's a method to it as well, so you don't burn your hands. You should go down slowly. The guys that just let themselves slide down got very sore hands. Once you're off that elephant, the obstacle course is starting to take its toll. But luckily the end is in sight, and you've got another pole to jump over, and you jump down into a pit where you jump down and you crawl through a hollow concrete blocks under the ground, which is you can't kneel up because your battle jacket prevents you from kneeling and crawling through, so you've got to crawl through on your hands and knees. This is again tiring. You've got to put yourself through with your tips of your toes pushing yourself forward, and with your elbows. Again, your elbows get sore, but there's not much time to think about that. And you've got people behind you trying to go through the tunnel as well. You squeeze out the other side and jump up, jump over a hole in the ground, and then you onto the second wall in the course. But luckily this wall, you're allowed to help your buddy, so you either bend down and someone leaps on your back and over the wall, or you give someone a helping hand up puts his boot in your hands, and then you're over the wall, and once you're up you bend down and you pull someone else up, and that's okay. You run down that embankment, and then you do another balancing test where you run across poles. A lot of guys find it easier to go across a pole with a buddy on another pole next to you, so you can sort of hold each other and balance across. Jumping into those tunnels under the ground, the shock of the cold water was actually very, very refreshing. But however, as you get out, your boots are full of water. Now they're now weighed down. Your blisters inside your boots are screaming because you've got water in, which makes it a whole lot worse. And you slosh around the rest of that obstacle course feeling very much heavier. Guys lying on their backs and trying to empty their boots of the water. The socks seem to have absorbed all the water, not much comes out. You finish that obstacle course wet through, full of mud, feeling a lot heavier. You've got to jog around the hangar, which is about 300 meters in diameter, and make it back to the beginning again, where you sit down and wait your turn for the next go. About 8 people fell off on this obstacle course, and a lot of them fell off at the wall. You make that obstacle course, and the last time, all the time telling yourself that if I make these poles, I won't have to do them again. This is the last time I'm going to be going under the barbed wire, and that's how you get to that last time on that obstacle course. You've got no strength in your arms, and it's just a bit of fuss bait towards the end. Everyone's very happy when they finish that obstacle course. The end is in sight, but we still got a surprise and wait, and that was the marble and the pole PT.
After the obstacle course, we all had to gather at the back of the hangar. There's a big gravel patch there under the opkassa. None of us are feeling very comfortable at this stage because we are sopping wet and our boots are full of water from the obstacle course. Captain Ramanda and Commandant Talia divided us into 2 groups, and they each took a group. Commandant Talia took his group for a PT lesson with marbles. It was a 20-minute class. First of all, we had to hold the marbles at chest height and then lift them into the air and then down again. We all had to work together or else we would do even more. At first he told us we had to do 10, which we didn't manage to do too well. We got up to about 8 and then he told us we weren't working together. We had to all shout out the numbers that we were doing together. We ended up doing about 15. Then we had to lie on our backs, still holding the marble. We weren't allowed to let the marble touch the ground. And we had to push the marble up in the air and then down again. Eventually, after quite a few of those, we stood up and had to hold the marbles on our shoulders. And then on his counts, we had to take it over our head and put it onto the other shoulder. Quite a lot of guys battled with this as they were getting cramps in the arms. Then, because the guys weren't working together, he told us we had to run around the hangar in 90 seconds, holding the marble on our chest. But because the marble is so heavy and uncomfortable, it kept on sagging down to our stomachs, and he saw this. When we came back, he told us we had to do it again. So we did it again, and then eventually he said, okay, all put down the marbles and we can go to the next lesson, which is one step closer to the end of the PD course. We all put down the marbles and lots of the guys didn't put them down right. They put it down and they made a bit of a noise. So we had to all lift them up again and do even more exercises. After that we put down the marbles and we went to Captain Reminder, who was giving a class with the poles. We had to hold the poles on our shoulders, and to his counts we had to lift it over onto our other shoulder. It was you and a partner stand on each side of a pole. After lots of those, for about 10 minutes, we all started getting the cramps in our arms, and eventually he said we can lie on our backs and hold the poles on our chests. The gravel that we were lying on ate into our backs as the pole was quite heavy onto our chests, and lots of us had little cuts and bruises on our backs afterwards. He told us to do sit-ups, which ate the bottom of our spine. Lots of us had raw spines at the bottom after all the sit-ups, because he doing sit-ups on all these stones and gravel. And we did about 20 sit-ups. Eventually we stood up and he said, if we can put down the poles in 2 minutes without making a single sound, we can end. We did this, but he said he heard them, so we had to pick them up again and go around the hangar in 90 seconds. Eventually we put them down and they said, okay, it's the end of the PD course. Then they said we got 2 more exercises and we're about to go into our second last one, which is exercise Angry Bee. It would be a 10-kilometer march in 1.5 hours. And then after this march, we go into our last exercise, which would be a bat surprise. He didn't tell us what that would be. When we started walking with wet boots and everything, and full kit on our backs, and we walked about 2 k's, and the commandant rode past us and shouted, "Come on guys, you can do it." So anyway, we carried on walking and walked about 3 kilometers, and I saw all the buckies parked on the side of the road, and they told us to sit down in the bush. We sat down, and Commandant told us, said, "Well done guys, you have done the PD course, you have made it." They handed out beers, and we all cheered, and the guys on the PD course went mad. They were so happy. Myself, I couldn't believe that I'd actually made the PD course and gone through it. Before the PD course, I was so scared and worried that I was going to get injuries or anything, or just not make one of the exercises. But now I was through, and I was going to go into my hang course where I could learn how to jump and become a paratrooper.
Now we get to the last exercise.
Okay, it was very hard. I didn't expect it to be as hard as it was, but I enjoyed it. I worked for it, and I think all of us have worked hard enough to now become paratroopers. Definitely. I'm glad it's finished. Very glad. Never want to do it again.
Ek onthou nog hoe opgewonde ek was oor die opleiding wat ons sou kry die dag. Dit was iets waarna ons elkeen uitgesien het van die begin wat ons hier gekom het. Die eerste dag is ons uitgereik met smocks en jumper boots. Dit was nuwe boots en die voete, mooi voete van die PT kursus wat so pas voltooi is, wou nie aldag lekker saamwerk nie. Ons is eerste oggend vroeg by die hangar ingelig oor al die reëls, en iets wat ek nogal Wat my nogal geraak het is die bidparade in die oggende voordat ons met die hanger die dag vir die dag begin. Ons is daar ingedeel in stringe, waar in elke string was daar 12 troepe. Elke string het 'n instrukteur gehad. Ek dink natuurlik nou nog ja, ons het die beste instrukteur, genaamd Sant van Vieren, omrede hy elke periode met soveel entoesiasme aanbied, en hy is so seker van sy saak, en hy maak seker dat ons alles korrek verstaan, en deeglik verstaan, voordat hy na die volgende periode toe oorgaan. Daar is 'n paar reëls wat ons moes nakom. Ons moes elke oggend mooi gestryk wees, ons smok moet skoon wees, ons brownbroeke moet skoon wees, die boetse moet blink, ons mag geen horlosies gedra het nie. Daar mag niks in ons sakke wees nie, want ons is die hele dag op en af, en heen en weer in die hanger, en mens kan dalk seer kry, as daar iets in jou sak is. Ons drag was 'n smok, 'n brownbroek, 'n berei, en 'n webbelt. In die oggend as ons in die hanger kom, dan vat ons berei af, en ons webbelt, en ons bære dit in rakke wat spesiaal daarvoor ingerig is. Die hanger is baie goed uitgelê. Daar kan so wat 250 troepe gelyktydig opgelei word. Die instrukteurs het hulle taak van opleiding baie goed bemeester. Ons hersien elke vorige periode voor ons met 'n volgende aangaan. Die valskermsprong kan in 3 fases opgedeel word, naamlik die uitspring uit die vliegtuig, die daling en die landing. Eerstens die uitspring. Dit vind plaas net binnekant die vliegtuig tot net buitekant die vliegtuig. 'n Daling is net buitekant die vliegtuig tot net voor jou voete die grond raak. En die landing is net voor jou voete die grond raak tot die landing voltooi is. Daar is verskillende opleidingsapparate in die hanger wat al 3 fases van die sprong dek. Hulle het dit so na moontlik aan die werklikheid gebring. Die instrukteurs gee eers 'n demonstrasie van elke periode wat ons gaan doen, waarmee ons gaan aangaan. En hy maak seker dat elkeen dit deeglik kan doen en deeglik verstaan. Ons is 'n groep verskillend Afrikaans sprekendes, Engels sprekendes, en daar's tot Portugese troepe wat by ons aangesluit het. En dit gaan nie aldag te goed nie. Want die instrukteurs moet nou in ag neem met die Engels en die Afrikaans, en so intussen moet dit ook nog vertaal in Portugees ook. So ek dink die instrukteurs het hulle hande vol met ons. Die eerste apparaat is 'n nabootse van die Dakota. Alles wat in die Dakota gebeur, jy noem uit te spring. Die afmetings is presies soos die van 'n Dakota, en ook alles wat in die Dakota gebeur, alle toerusting wat hulle gebruik in die Dakota is in die nabootse. Wanneer jy in die vliegtuig klim, moet jy jouself eers met 'n veiligheidsgordel vasmaak. Die afstuurder wat die troepe afstuur, maak dan seker dat elkeen vas is, en dan is ons gereed om op te styg. Ons het net vandag op ons eerste rit deur die lug, wat hulle noem 'n fright flight, gaan. Die troepe was natuurlik baie opgewonde daaroor. Die gesigte wat uit die vliegtuig uitgeklim het alles vertel. Maar terwyl ons daar was, ons moes alles doen vir 'n normale sprong. Ons moes in die deur staan, daarna moet jy weer teruggaan na jou plek en weer vasmaak. 'n hele paar van ons het maar met gesweete gesigte daar uitgestap. Die tweede opleidingsapparaat in die hanger is waar 'n korrekte valskermposisie beheer moet word om 'n landing in enige rigting so sag moontlik te verseker, en ek beklemtoon so sag moontlik, want die landing is nie altyd so sag nie. Die derde opleidingsapparaat is waar ons geleer moet word om wat om te doen nadat jy uit die vliegtuig gespring het en jou valskerm korrek en evenredig bokant jou oopgegaan het. Ons doen dit in 'n harnas. Die harnas wat ons aantrek, hy het nie 'n hoofvalskerm op nie, maar hy het wel 'n noodvalskerm. Daar is verskillende metodes waar jy hom aanwend. Ek kan byvoorbeeld as jy moet in waterland, moet jy jou noodvalskerm losmaak, jy moet jou beenbande losmaak, jy moet jou borsband losmaak, en dan wanneer jou voete die water raak, dan kan jy uit jou harnas uitkom en is jy vry van jou harnas. En sodoende raak jy nie verstrengel en die toue wat die valskerm vanaf die valskerm na die harnas. Daar is ook ander waar jy byvoorbeeld in bome gaan land, waar jy jou gesig, die sagte gedeeltes van jou pols en jou gesig toe draai, en om sodoende jou gesig te beskerm teen takke. Dan moet altyd verseker dat jy in 'n goeie valskermposisie is. Dis nou waar jou arms in die liggen nou, jou voete bymekaar, jou knie bymekaar, jou knie effens gebuig en jou voete onder jou liggaam. Ons het ook opleidingsapparaat wat ons noem die block and tackle. Dit is 'n harnas wat hulle aan 'n groot staalkonstruksie met stuurbande vas is. Dan is daar 3 troepe wat jy optrek, 10 cm van die grond af. 4 ander troepe swaai jou heen en weer, tot die instrukteur dink jy is hoog genoeg. Dan los hulle jou eers. Ons doen vorentoe en agtertoe landings, sowel as landings na links of landings na regs. Ons was bietjie in die begin skrikkerig vir die apparaat, want dit het nogal gelyk of mens seer kan val met hom. Maar nadat jy die eerste maal gedoen het, is dit nie so erg nie. Dan het ons ook gegaan apparaat wat hulle noem die fan. Dit is hoog bo in die hanger, is 'n platform. Die troepe stap boontoe waar afstuurders is. Op elke fan is daar 2 afstuurders. Hulle maak jou 'n harnas vas. Dan moet jy, soos jy in 'n normale uitspringposisie sou staan, jou linkervoet voor en jou regtervoet gemaklike posisie agter. Dan moet jy so ver moontlik na vorentoe uitreik, en wanneer die afstuurder jou op die skouer klap, dan moet jy so ver moontlik vorentoe dryf en jou voete bymekaar kry, jou regterarm oor jou noodvalskerm, jou linkerarm oor jou regterarm, en jou kin moet jy op jou bors kry. Ons het dan nog 'n opleidingsapparaat wat hulle noem die APKAS. Dis 'n springtoring buitekant die hanger. Dit is omtrent dieselfde hoogte as die platform waarvan ons by die fan mee afgespring het. Hy is in 'n lang kabel met 'n katrol aan vasgemaak. Dis ook 'n harnas wat jy aantrek. Dan op die klap van die afstuurder, dan spring jy by die springtoring uit en jy doen jou normale vliegdrills. Jy tel 1000, 2000, 3000. Dan kyk jy op, jy kyk of jou valskerm oopgegaan het. Jy sit jou hande op jou stuurbane, jou hande op die voorste stuurbande. Jy kyk links, jy kyk regs, dis observasie. Jy kyk onder jou. Jy kom in 'n goeie valskermposisie. As die samoeër tevrede is, dan hoef jy nie weer te gaan nie.
On Friday we found out that we were going to jump, and there was a lot of relief from all of us. We had a test on that Friday. We had to jump out of what was called the ARPCAS, which tests our flight drills and our exit. I was very relieved to get through that because I'd had a couple of bad exits out of the fan, and I think a lot of us were very relieved after that. Through the weekend, most of the time was spent going through our drills that we would do when we exited the plane, just to make sure that in our minds at least our minds were set for the jump. But we didn't know whether we were or not. I remember practicing on Sunday with a couple of friends who were going to jump, going through over and over the drills. On Monday morning we woke up and you realize that what was once a dream is now slowly becoming a reality, but it still hadn't become a total reality yet. We had like a silence throughout the whole bungalow. Nobody seemed to be able to say anything to each other because we were all thinking the same thing, but we couldn't seem to find any words. We went to breakfast. It was a very quiet breakfast. Nobody really spoke. And then we moved up to the hangar. Some guys were very quiet, looking at each other, trying to read each other's thoughts. Some guys were talking, trying to relax themselves by just joking. But we all knew that the same things were going through our minds. Then we arrived at Tempe Air Base, jumped out of the sawmills, and started to unpack our parachutes. We then waited for the arrival of the aeroplane, and the arrival of the aeroplane sort of was the first time you really realized that this was actually happening, that you were really, today was the day you were going to jump. The plane touched down, and the guys who were in front of me, the line that was a couple of lines that were in front of me, had to put the equipment on. The equipment gets checked once by yourself, once by your instructor, and then again inside the airplane. So it's a very safe procedure. It was also a very quiet time for everybody, because we'd watch the plane fly by and the guys jump out, and then we would figure out their mistakes and make sure that we weren't going to make those same mistakes. But that never came about. We try to imagine what it must be like for them, but you knew that you'd never know until you finally jumped out. Your tension builds up and your fear builds up. I think the only thing that kept our minds in the right state of mind was the orders from the instructors and the sound of the engines. Otherwise we would have gone to a dream world. We then climbed into the plane. All the guys who were odd numbers would sit on the left-hand side of the plane as you were looking towards the pilot from the back, and all the even guys on the right-hand side of the plane. We then went through our pre-flight check, and that is also another time of silence where everybody just looks at each other. A couple of guys give a wink or a smile, but there are no words passed. The instructors then check that everybody's seat belts are on, and the plane starts revving up. We're then up in the air, and the silence is there again. And you're just thinking, you're going over and over what you have to do when you jump out of the plane. And then you hear the cry, "Get ready for action." And that makes you realize that this is it. This is it. But what it is, you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea. You're so frightened. It's hard to explain. It really is. When you hear that order, "Get ready for action," you move forward, clip your static line into your cable, and wait for the next order, which is for your string to stand up. You then stand up on the order, string 2 stand up, then string 2 will repeat that order, stand up, and then they'll stand up. And then they'll have to do a equipment check. They check their helmet, their reserve, their chest strap, their leg strap, and then they check that their hook's up. They check their cables moving, that there's free movement on their cable. They check the guy in front of them is hooked up, that there's free movement on his cable, that his static line is on the left, that his elastics are all in contact, and that his 2 outer pack tires are not broken or damaged. You then wait for the next order, which is action stations. And when you hear that order, your heart jumps, your pulse rate picks up, and your mind just starts to float. The plane's moving, it's swaying like a ship almost, and you don't know how. Things are going too quickly. You don't have time to think about anything. You want to shout to the instructors. You want to tell them to slow down, but you can't. And then all of a sudden you're in the door. You don't even realize you're in the door, and you're there, and then it's go and you jump. I remember jumping to darkness. I couldn't keep my eyes open the first time I jumped, and it's hard to remember what happened. Everything was just so quick. From an aeroplane where there was noise and people and wind and shouting into like a world where everything was just silence. There was just total silence. You were on your own you were soaring in the sky. It was amazing. And then you're having this like dream, and then you realize, oh, you have to go through your drills again, and you haven't counted. I don't remember counting at all, but I remember looking up to look at my parachute. You have to check if the cables are twisted or not. You do. Then you then go through your drills, which is to look to your left, look to your right, look underneath you. Then kick out of your twist if you have any. Then get into your parachute position. Once you're in that parachute position, you start enjoying the view, looking around you, finding it hard to believe that you've just jumped out of a plane at 1,500 feet. When your feet hit the ground, you just sort of automatically go into the role. That's also through the training that you get in the hangar, and that you don't really have to physically do it. It comes automatically. And then you're in the real world again. You're not in your dream world anymore. You're on the ground. You're getting dragged along the ground by your parachute. You have to release your cables. You have to release the parachute so that it's separated from your harness. You then take off your harness and your reserve parachute. While you're lying on the ground, you then pick them up, go to where the parachute's lying, roll it up, put your reserve in that on the parachute to stop it from blowing away, and then go and report to your instructor. And then you realize it wasn't so bad after all, and it was just what you expected it to be, just as amazing as you expected it to be.
rechts, green, bal. Stuit. Rechts, terug. Hol. Stuit, Jen. Rechtsop. Jen. Rechts, green, bal. Rechts, terug. Hol. Zo, Oppas, pas! Rechts, 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 links! Rechts, 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 links! Door, Kiri! Pas! Rechts, 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 links! Rechts! Oh! Rechts! Rechts, om! 1, 3.
Action!